Right, hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be about retirement. Now the videos of Emma and I do going on our travels, that's going to be coming up soon. In fact, by the time you watch this, probably will have already been on the first one. That video will be coming soon, but today's video is about retirement. And I am 45 now, and my goal is to retire at 55. And I tend to think about these things quite a bit more when it's just come summer holidays, come back from summer holidays. You know, you get that kind of like, do I really have to go back to work kind of feeling? Wouldn't it be nice if I could just be off all the time? And that's kind of what retirement is. And I do find that I think about those things more and more when I've been on my kind of summer holidays. It kind of feels weird thinking about retirement because in my mind, I'm still in my 20s. You know, the thought of retirement just seems a bit ridiculous. But when then I speak to like someone in their 20s, or I speak to my like 19-year-old nephew and he's like, all right, bro, how's it going? Yeah, it's well lit, it's sick, you know? And I go, I don't know what language you're talking, but I don't understand it. And that's when I realised I'm not in my 20s, I'm closer to retirement than I am in my 20s. So it's time to start thinking about it. And this is actually something I'm not just started thinking about this over the summer, but thinking about this for quite a while now, kind of looking into it. And I thought it might be useful to the people watching this video because a lot of the people who watch my videos are in their kind of between 35 and 55. So if you haven't thought about retirement, you might be thinking about it, this might be useful to you. This video is going to be quite financy. It's not financial advice. Go and do your own research. This is about my situation and what I'm doing about it. So some of it might not apply to you, but I suspect that some of it will. So a bit of background context about me. So I have followed the fairly stereotypical life. So I kind of went to school, I got a job, I met someone, we rented a house, we bought a house, we got married, we had a kid, we had another kid, we built a 2-story extension on that house, we then moved to another house, we built another extension, which some of you might have watched on the channel recently, and we've kind of just followed this very stereotypical life. And I bought my house in 2006, and this was just before the financial crisis, and at the time that I was buying that house, I was thinking, is this a good idea? Because house prices were obviously at their peak at that time. And I could still remember when houses were like a lot cheaper way back, you know, not that long before. And I thought, is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? But it's actually turned out to be one of the best decisions we made. If you remember as far back as 2006, this was the time of Northern Rock mortgages. And I don't know if you remember these, but they gave out 100% mortgages. And for some people, they gave out 120% mortgages, which is just ridiculous if you think about it in today's standards. Probably the reason why they went bankrupt. So in 2008, the financial crisis came along, Northern Rock went bankrupt, load of banks went bankrupt, and the interest rate dropped. And it was around this time that my wife was working for a bank, and she got a mortgage rate that it tracked below the base rate. So the mortgage rate was 0.11% below the base rate. And the mortgage rate at that time, the base rate dropped to 0.5%. So we ended up with a mortgage rate of 0.39%, which is just ridiculous. I wish I could have had it the whole time I had a mortgage. But the reason I'm telling you this is because I just carried on paying the same amount as what I was paying before when we had our Northern Rock mortgage, even though our payments had dropped significantly. And this is what kind of gave me the kind of mindset of overpaying my mortgage. So the first tip on this kind of retirement chat is mortgages, and my goal is to pay off my mortgage within 3 years. So that's the first thing that I'm going to try to do to plan for this retirement. Now I've got a mortgage at the moment. We're just coming towards the end of a 5-year deal that the percentage on that is incredibly low, 1.3%. I haven't actually been overpaying for the last 5 years because it hasn't made any sense, because the mortgage rate has been 1.3%, but savings rates has been much higher. So it's made much more sense to save than it has to overpay my mortgage. So that's one of the things you have to look out for when you're trying to manage your debts. Look for the debt that has the most expensive interest and get that one paid off first. So in my case, my only debt is my mortgage, and typically it would make sense to pay that debt off first, but given that savings rates have been higher recently, it's made more sense to just save. However, when my mortgage deal runs out in a year's time, that will change. Mortgage rates have gone up since then. My mortgage rate is going to go up, and it probably makes sense then to kind of pay it. So I've been saving and saving and saving. Then I'm going to just pay off a big chunk of my mortgage, and then in 3 years I'll take out one more deal, one last mortgage deal for 2 years. At the end of that 2 years, I'll just pay it off completely. So that's my goal. Now, the reason this can make sense is by overpaying or paying my mortgage off early, it means that I pay less interest. That's less money to the bank. That's more money that I can invest into my retirement fund. Now, I'll give you an example. So I did a little calculation on ChatGPT. I'll put the graph up here. But if you say had £100,000 mortgage, and that's not my situation, but I just wanted to give it as an example because it's kind of easy numbers. If you had £100,000 mortgage, if you were to pay that off in 10 years, you will pay £20,000 in interest at today's mortgage rates. I just picked 3.8% because that's a mortgage rate that I saw was available. So 3.8% over 10 years, you're going to pay 20 grand in interest. That's money straight to the bank. If you pay that 100 grand off over 20 years, you're going to pay 42 grand in interest, money to the bank. If I can pay it off in 3 years, I'll pay £6,000 in interest, which is still a lot. It's still painful, but it's a lot less than the others. And then I can take that money that I would have given to the bank and I can invest it instead. And the other thing that I can do is once I've paid off my mortgage, I can take that £1,000 or whatever it is I'm paying at the moment, and I can then invest that. Now, there is one slight caveat with this. If you think you're going to need the money, it doesn't make any sense to overpay your mortgage or pay your mortgage off, because you might need it at some point in the future. The other thing that you will hear quite a lot is when you watch all these YouTube videos and all these people, they'll say, paying off your mortgage, that's a ridiculous thing to do. You should invest it in the stock market, because the stock market is going to pay you 8% returns a year, and that's a much better thing to do. And those people, they're right. That is the best thing to do, and that's the best thing to do with your money. However, in my mind, I want to get my mortgage paid off, because although that might not make the most financial sense, the thought of having my own house that nobody can take away from me, if I get ill, if I lose my job or whatever, I'll just have my house and nobody can take it away from me. And the peace of mind of that is worth more to me than I may or may not earn out of the stock market, because there's no guarantee you're going to earn that kind of return on the stock market. History tells us that you will do okay, but the peace of mind for me makes it worth me paying off my mortgage. So that is the first thing that I'm going to do, the retirement strategy, to pay off my mortgage. Right, so a crucial part to that is I realise that not everyone can pay off their mortgages. Some people have already paid off their mortgages, but I realise that some people can't. If you can't, still try and overpay it, because the more you can overpay, the less interest you pay to the bank. Right, so the next critical part about retiring is a pension. Now, in my case, I've been paying into a pension, a company pension, since I was 20. So for the last 25 years, I've been paying into a company pension, and I've been employed the whole time. Now, for the first 15 years of that, I had what's called a defined benefit pension, which is also known as a final salary pension. And this is kind of like the king of pensions, apparently, because it goes up with inflation. It's based on your final salary, and companies don't offer them anymore because it was costing companies too much money, and they pretty much stopped them. So 10 years ago, I moved to what's called a defined contribution pension, which is basically a pension where your pension payments get invested into the stock market, and depending on how well the stock market's doing will depend on how much you get paid out. But in general, defined benefit final salary is better. Defined contribution is not as good, but slightly more flexible. So the company that I currently work for, if I pay in 8% of my salary, the company will pay in 12%. That's 20% of my gross salary that goes into a pension pot every year. That gets invested into the stock market. Hopefully that will grow over years, and then it will give me a good payout. It will give me a good payout at the end. But one thing I advise you to check, and something that I've checked recently, is you can log onto a portal at work, and then it will give you a kind of model, and you can say to it, what if I retire at this age? How much will I get? What if I retire at that age? How much will I get? And it might surprise you. It might surprise you in the wrong way, where you go, actually, I'm not going to have as much as I thought I was going to have. And that's where you really need to start looking into this, to sort of try and add some more into it. Or it might surprise you the other way and go, oh wow, actually, we could retire much earlier than we thought we could. and we'll actually be okay. So go and check out those portals. There's likely, if you've worked for lots of different companies, you'll have multiple different portals that you're going to need to log on to. I'd advise that you go and do that. Now the thing with company pensions is the part that you pay in is tax-free. So I've done a little calculation on ChatGPT, which I'll put on the screen now. But basically what this is saying to you is you can either take money now, or you can have it put into your pension pot. So one example there is if you're earning 50 grand a year, you could either take £2,400 now, or you can get 10 grand into your pension pot. So basically you can either take money now if you need it, but if you don't really need that money, put it into your pension pot, because it's going to generally pay out 4 times the amount into your pension pot, and that just goes in there now. But the other benefit is that money sits in there and it just grows and grows over the time, and by the time you come to take it in years to come, it's going to be worth a lot more money. So company pension makes total sense if you have the spare money to do it now. Now the same with the mortgage. Paying money into a company pension, you can't easily get it back out again. It's kind of locked in. So if you think you're going to need that money, don't pay it in. The other thing, big caveat with company pensions, and actually with private pensions, so even if you're self-employed and you've got a private pension, is that the government determine when you can take that money out. So when I looked into this recently, I learned, because I was obviously looking to retire at 55, I learned that the government recently changed the rules. They now say you cannot take money out of your own pension until you're 57. So they've kind of changed the rules. Now, even though it's your money, nothing to do with the government, it's your money, for your private pension or your work pension, they determine when you can take this out. And the likelihood is the next 10 years, they'll probably move the goalposts again. They'll move it to 58, 60 or whatever. And what that means, in my case, I'm looking to retire at 55, I am going to have to finance the first few years of my pension, the time that I'm going to have off, my retirement. So if the government changes it to say 58 by the time I retire, I'm going to have to finance the first 3 years of that before I can start drawing down on my pension. So if you're thinking about retiring at 55, just keep a lookout for that, because you cannot take the money back out of your pension when you think you should be able to. So in my case, where I'm working right now, I can pay in 8%, they pay in 12%. I actually pay in a bit more than that now. So that's my kind of second strategy on retirement. So first one is pay off the mortgage. Second one is to pay as much into my company pension as I can, because it's tax free. So that's my second strategy in trying to be able to retire. One thing I haven't mentioned is state pension. Now state pension is something that I've pretty much given up on. I think the age that you can currently take it is like 68. Honestly, in 10 years time, by the time I'm able to take it, I don't even know, you might need to be 70, 75, who knows. I've pretty much given up on the state pension, but if that's something that you are thinking about relying on, you need to have 35 years of national insurance contributions. You can log on to the government website now and check that. That is something that I will have, so I will get a state pension at some point if I'm still alive by the time they actually give it to me. Right, so that brings on to my final thing as part of this strategy to retire, and that is savings. So obviously once I've paid off my mortgage, I will then have 7 years to try and save so that I can actually retire at 55 while I wait to get my pension. So there's two types of, there's one way that you can really save in the UK, and that is through an ISA. So there's two types of ISAs. You can get a cash ISA or a stocks and shares ISA. Most people know what a cash ISA is. It's basically a savings account where you don't pay any tax on the interest that you earn on those savings. Second one, stocks and shares ISA, which probably less people have because they're a little bit more confusing. But with a stocks and shares ISA, you basically invest in the stock market and hope that your shares grow. And if your shares grow, you don't pay any tax, you don't pay any capital gains tax, and you don't pay any tax on the dividends that you might earn. The one caveat you've got to look out for ISAs is the maximum amount you can put into an ISA per year is £20,000, and that is across both of them. So you can't put 20,000 in the stocks and shares and 20,000 in the cash ISA. You can only put 20,000 total across the two. So you might decide to put 10 in one, 10 in another. Obviously I won't have any mortgage to pay, so I'll just be able to put all my savings that I'm not having to pay on my mortgage into that ISA. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably do a split between a cash ISA and a stocks and shares ISA. It probably makes more sense putting in a stocks and shares ISA, but I don't really like taking risks. Shares can go up and down, whereas your savings is more guaranteed. I know that's not the best strategy that people will tell you about, but it's just what I'm going to do. Right, so sort of summarise. At 45, my main focus really over the next 3 years is to get my mortgage paid off. Once I've done that, I'm going to overpay more into my pension. I'll probably up the percentage that I pay into my company pension, because as I said before, it's tax-free. Then I'm going to invest in, split my kind of investments into a cash ISA, a stocks and shares ISA, and kind of build that up over years. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about trying to do, I don't really know if it'll work out, but I'm going to try and come up with some sort of side hustle business idea that's going to make me millions. That may or may not happen. Perhaps I'll get a squillion subscribers on YouTube, and then I can just retire on a beach somewhere. So if you're interested in finding out if I do this, make sure you subscribe now and then stay subscribed for the next 10 years, and then you'll actually see if I manage to do this. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.